Good day and welcome to another edition of the Military and Foreign Affairs Network. I am your host, the voice of reason. In this episode of the ongoing coverage inside of the former state of civil war, we're going to continue our look at the ongoing offensive operation by the Amhara paramilitaries and Ethiopian army in its effort to move in a north and easterly direction with the intent on seizing control of possibly Weldia and Gashina. So first off, the date is October 10th, and the reports for today would indicate that fighting continues. Fighting is fairly significant and intense at times. However, with that being said, and this is the early stages of this so-called offensive being launched by the Ethiopian military and its Amharan allies. Now, it would appear that right off the bat, things have been a struggle for the Ethiopian military. They have not been able to advance. They are moving forward, and they come into contact with forces of the Tigrayan region, and are immediately engaged in some rather intense operations. And again, the forces that are being deployed by the Ethiopian military are not very well trained. Many of these forces, probably well over 50% of these units and forces, have been recently recruited into the military apparatus. But right now we're seeing really two areas in which forces are attempting to move north in the vicinity of Dese with the intent of taking control of the first objective, which would be Mursa. We continue to hear reports of fighting that is taking place south of Mursa. We continue to hear that the movement of these forces on the part of the Ethiopian regime is fairly slow going. They are meeting resistance, heavy resistance, and I defined it as blistering resistance in some areas. Right now, the only real hope in terms of major victories or morale boosts for the Ethiopian military, the Amharan paramilitary forces, as it moves north, is the so-called use of its air force or air power. And we continue to hear rumors of the deployment of drone assets utilizing precision airstrikes. Again, you would think that given their reported use, the Ethiopian military, the state media, the Amharan regional media, but more specifically the state-run media of Ethiopia, the federal government media, would be utilizing video footage, gun camera footage, footage of these drone FLIR forward-looking infrared optics as a morale boost and show the footage on TV and or streaming it, and we have not yet seen that happen so far. Now, the main reason we may not be seeing footage of drone use by the Ethiopian regime against targets in the Amhara region inside of Tigray is that it would officially confirm that outside actors such as possibly Turkey, China, Iran, United Arab Emirates, whomever, are actively supplying drones to the state of Ethiopia in an ongoing civil war. And there could be, especially for Turkey, there could be ramifications if that became public, and if in fact the Ethiopian regime started to actively show the footage that we saw in the Armenian Azeri Nagorno-Karabakh conflict. So the Azeri regime showed huge amounts of footage of this activity that was going on in terms of the drone use, and it was absolutely both a morale boost for the for Azerbaijan, and then obviously the Armenians would also see this, and it would actually decrease their morale because the Armenians did not have the same type of drone capability. But again, we're not seeing that from the Ethiopian media at all. Nothing has been released. The question is if these drones are being used, and we would suspect that some drones are in fact being used, and there is some precision strike capability. How much, we really don't know yet, but it's there, but it's not being shown. Could it be? Could these drones that the Ethiopian military are using? Could it be by the Ethiopian intelligence services, the security services? And then that would probably be much likely not to be released, as opposed if they were actively being used by the Ethiopian Air Force. I think there's a little bit of a difference there in terms of information that would be made public. But again, if those systems are being used, you would think that the Ethiopian state would show these so-called victories that are occurring, and that would take the form of this gun camera footage by the drones. In other areas, we continue to see operations by the Ethiopian military, the Amhara military, west of Gashina. We do not believe that they are very close to Gashina as yet. It would appear that right now the fighting is taking place in the vicinity of Arbit, which would make sense. Again, this is from Gashina to Arbit to east. Is basically a very extended mesa that runs just west of Arbit and south of Falakit. Again, it's a plateau, as you can see here on the map, and the plateau narrows here at the B-22 highway. You can see better if I zoom in here. So again, very, very difficult defensive terrain to fight in. You have an extended valley or defilade here, and then obviously this would be a very defendable position along this ridge, and then obviously the route along the B-22 as it gets closer to Arbit is very narrow, and if proper use of artillery is being used, this area could be engaged very effectively in terms of the Tigrayan Defense Forces utilizing its 130, 122 millimeter captured artillery howitzers and guns to that effect. But again, fairly intense fighting west of Gashina in the vicinity of Arbit. The Ethiopian military, seems to be having trouble advancing east of Arbit, and again, this narrow gap here is probably causing some of the issues that we're seeing of getting past Arbit and then making a direct assault on Gashina. But obviously we'll continue to monitor the situation and report. Again, the fighting continues south of Weldia. It is unknown at this time who controls Mersa. It would appear that the Tigrayan Defense Forces still control Mersa, and the fighting is taking place south of Mersa at this time. But again, as I talked about in a previous video, and I had shown this exact location, as this would be a very, very defendable access point towards Gashina. And I would assume that this area here is being heavily fortified and defended by the Tigray Defense Forces. So again, I would assume that the fighting is very intense just south of Mersa, in the vicinity of Adare, and just south of Adare along the A2 highway. And in this town as well here too. I would imagine the fighting is intense. It would be interesting to know if this bridge was blown, it may not matter, as this appears to be a intermittent river. Not sure the status of this river right now. We're just coming out of the rainy season, so in all likelihood, this image may look a lot different than it does now. But right now, again, just in terms of the operation, this supposed very large operation by the forces of the Amhara militias and the Ethiopian military, does not appear to be moving very fast. They are sludging along, facing stiff resistance. Again, all we can report at this point is the use of so-called air power. Again, we've talked about the Ethiopian Air Force before, probably no more than 12 sorties a day, and then possible drone use. But again, that sort of tempo in terms of air operations is simply not going to win the war for the Ethiopian military unless they have 20, 30 drones deployed in an unexhaustible supply of MAML missiles, precision guided missiles. And that is doubtful at that point. At this point, those systems again are very expensive. The Ethiopian defense budget prior to conflict was around $500–600 million. So very, very low defense budget, and many people are being pressed into service now. Conscripted forces who are untrained, unmotivated, and appear to be struggling at this point. But again, we'll continue to monitor the situation and report. Have a good day, everybody.